And we're live. So it's just about 4 o'clock. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Devin Glick. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm here with my colleague, Monica Mugnori, who is our grant specialist. And we have today a great conversation and FAQ session on our public diplomacy small grants. And well, before we get started, let me just go over some rules about the webinar, just so that we can answer as many of your questions as possible. I know that we'll probably have a lot of questions and we'll try to get to as many as possible. And to help us do so, I ask that if you have a question, please put it into the Q&A section. So that you should see under in your little Zoom toolbar, there's a button for Q&A. Put your questions into the Q&A section and we'll try to get to as many of those as possible. If you have just a general comment, feel free to put that into the chat box, but it's much easier to organize our Q&A from the Q&A section. I'll also note that a lot of you submitted really good questions in advance during the registration. And we'll try to get to as many of those already during the presentation. I tried to incorporate as many of those questions or answers to those questions as possible. So please do listen into our presentation. And if you find that we have not adequately answered your question, or you have a different question that wasn't covered, please do add it to the Q&A section of Zoom. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Today we have a lot to cover. So I will start by going over the types of grants. What is a grant? And we'll talk about some of our own public diplomacy funding opportunities. I'll then talk about how to prepare an application, what we're looking for in the different parts of the narrative, the budget, and what specific required forms you'll need to prepare for a grant proposal. We'll talk a little bit about eligibility, who and what is eligible to apply for a grant, how to submit the grant application. We'll talk about the grants review and selection process. And actually part of this, I will turn it over to my colleague, Monica, who has a very important topic, which is the top reasons why grants do not pass the technical proposal. So you'll want to pay extra close attention to that part. And then finally, with the remaining time in our hour today, we will answer as many of the questions as possible that you have. And so with that, I'll talk about what is a grant. So a grant is a funding mechanism. It's very broad, and it can mean many things. A grant is a simple word to describe a federal award from the US government. And it's just basically the many ways that the US government gives money. You can see there's over 50 government agencies and 1,250 federal programs that award grants. Monica and we work for the US State Department, which is hosted here at the US Embassy in Nairobi. So our grants are through the US State Department, and even more specifically, we're talking only today about public diplomacy grants. So with that, I'll remind you that you may have heard other information about grants or heard about different grant programs that are out there also with the US government. And it might seem different, and that is because, yes, we are many different agencies, many different organizations, and funding streams from the US, from Congress, and I won't get into all of that, but just know that there are many different ways that the US government gives money, and this is just one program that we're talking about today. However, all grants follow the same linear life cycle. It starts with a pre-award, which includes sort of creating the funding opportunity, which is what we do, the application, which is what you do, the making award decisions, which is again us, and then the award, which is sort of the negotiation and decision between the grantee and us, and then post-award, which is the successful implementation of the award, and closeout, which is then certifying that the goals have been met and the money has been spent. They have been said they would. And types of grants. So within each type of federal financial assistance, they have different purposes and serve different and have different sort of frameworks and legal. So this slide is a little bit getting into the legal framework. of the grant. So a fixed amount award is designed for small, simple grants that have known actual costs. This is because after we initially award this grant, we are unable to amend it to adjust for changes in cost or additional costs. So if we grant it as a fixed amount award, it should be considered firm costs. Even if they are still estimates, they cannot change. A grant, which is the overall larger term, which is what we usually use to talk about all of these, is the sort of the legalese on what a grant is. And the State Department, or we must use a grant when the principal purpose of the relationship is to transfer a thing of value, which is often money, to a recipient, which is the grantee, to carry out a public purpose of support or stimulation. And in this case, a substantial involvement by the agency is not expected. So this sort of the difference between a grant, which is we're giving this to an organization for a public purpose rather than a contract, which would be more something that been sort of what we need in our office, right? And then a cooperative agreement is the same as a grant, except in this case, there will be substantial involvement from the US Embassy. And I'll just note that in all grants, we do want to be involved. We, of course, these are sort of our programs that we want to be involved with. We want to know about what events are coming up. We want to be invited as speakers, and we want to hear all about the progress. But the difference between a grant and a cooperative agreement is that the cooperative agreement actually has more specific or more substantial, of course, involvement in the carrying out of the grant. And for instance, it might be that the US Embassy has a say in what exactly the content is, or who exactly the participants will be, or who the speaker, or approve all the speakers in that case. You don't right now actually have to worry too much about the type of grant. Just for reference, the type of grant will be decided as we negotiate and figure out the award terms and conditions. So when you're putting together your proposal, this is not something really that you need to work into your proposal. This is something that would come later. And now we're drilling down a little bit more specific to public diplomacy grants. So today we're talking about public diplomacy and not development. And which I mean by, so public diplomacy is the funding that we get from Congress, is specifically for explaining to foreign audiences US government policy. So there has to be that element of exchange and sort of US-Kenyan cooperation. And so the general purpose of public diplomacy grants are to strengthen cultural, academic, and professional ties between the United States and Kenya through programming and exchanges that highlight shared values and promote bilateral cooperation. So this is very important. All of the grants that we do here in public diplomacy include this element of US culture, of American culture, and it must, or it in some way includes an American expert, an American organization or institution, or in some way will promote understanding of US policy and perspectives. The funding that we use for these grants, that is how it must be used. The US government in other grants, not these grants, does a lot of great development work. The US government and also US businesses and charity organizations invest millions of dollars in development in Kenya. And so there's a lot of great other development programs. However, this grant program is not for development. And unfortunately, we cannot consider any proposals that are focused solely on development. And I'll also say we're looking for good ideas. Part of the idea of the grant program is that we have sort of our goals that we have at the US Embassy and with the US foreign policy goals. And we know that those align very well with a lot of what organizations are doing here in Kenya. And often we may not know about you, or we may not know about those great ideas that you have that fit very well with the work that we want to do. So we're we're looking for good ideas. And if at the kernel of your grant proposal, there is a great idea, just know that we can work with it. I think that's after this slide, I will just stay a little, one moment longer on this slide, because if there's anything more important, it's this one. Just knowing that your grants must include some US cultural exchange element, must promote understanding of US foreign policy, and we're looking for good ideas. And if you have a good idea, we would look to work with you. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. And so our next, my next slide is on funding opportunities, where to find funding opportunities. And you can find our funding opportunities on our website, which is there, where you can search US Embassy Nairobi. And under that, you can see education culture. You'll see our public affairs grants, and that's where we'll post all of our grants. Also, all grants are required to be posted on grants.gov. So search grants.gov and go and search the word Nairobi, and you'll find all of the grants from our embassy, but also grants.gov includes all federal financing. So if you find that public diplomacy grant is not the grant mechanism for you, you might find another federal agency that is offering that has something that works with your proposal. And then we'll see that US Embassy, that we post funding opportunities throughout the year on a variety of topics. So submit, and also submit well in advance. I also mentioned we'll also post it on social media. So follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more grants updates. Sorry. And the main grant opportunity that we'll talk about today, which is the one that's posted right now, is our annual program statement, which I'll also refer to as the Small Grants Program. And this annual program statement really encapsulates the breadth or the entirety of the US goals in US goals in Kenya and in the US-Kenya partnership. And it's very broad, so that we can get a lot of great ideas from all of you. The awards generally range, the minimum award amount is $10,000 to a maximum ceiling of $50,000. But typically the awards will range from $15,000 to $25,000 per award. And right now we don't have sort of a limit on the number of awards. It's sort of we're collecting submissions on a rolling basis. And we'll have our next review panel in late April. So that means if you have your proposal, please submit your proposal as soon as possible, so that it will be in our inboxes and ready for review by mid-April. The final deadline for submission is June 30th. So we will not be accepting any proposals after June 30th for the annual program statement. And I'll just go over the 5 key goals in the annual program statement and these 5 themes. So as I stated before, it's a public diplomacy grant, so it must have some aspect of US cultural exchange, so connecting Americans and Kenyans in some way. And then the 5 other key goals is 1, reinforce US-Kenyan shared values. This is also very broad, so these proposals would explore, expand, and reflect on historical and contemporary connections between the United States and Kenyan cultural institutions and groups. The second would be advance regional and global security. And this advances mutual security goals through funding proposals that promote peaceful dispute and conflict resolution and build lasting partnerships and collaborations that bridge tribal, religious, and regional divides. The third is promote economic prosperity through innovation and entrepreneurship. So these are proposals that promote the shared economic prosperity, and it also includes sort of transparency, values of entrepreneurship and innovation, and promoting the empowerment of underserved communities and youth, and the benefits of expanded trading opportunities between the United States and Kenya. The fourth is promote rule of law, democracy, and respect for individual liberty. And these proposals would focus on rule of law, democratic governance, civic participation, fighting corruption, and media literacy and media independence. And finally, promoting health cooperation. So promoting the rapid and sustainable development through funding proposals that focus on rule of law, democratic governance. Oh, sorry, I'm reading the wrong one. So these promote rapid and sustainable development through funding proposals that focus on advancing health cooperation, creating a healthy society through collaborative solutions to existing and emerging health concerns. So all proposals should fall within one of those 5 buckets. And now I'll turn our attention over to preparing applications. In general, all proposals must have a narrative portion, a budget, and a budget narrative, along with the required SF424 documents, which are available at grants.gov. So talking about our narrative proposal, one of the main things we see is that it's a lot of jargon or too colloquial. Please make sure that your narrative is very clear and concise. It needs to include all of the relevant information so that you don't leave us asking questions at the end. You shouldn't include any unsupported assumptions. And if there's something that if you make an assumption, you should cite it or provide the evidence. And a proposal really should describe a need, a specific and achievable plan, and how you will address that need. And also it should be very clearly linked to the objectives and goals stated in the funding opportunity. So those five buckets that I mentioned in the last slide, your funding or your proposal should be very clearly answering one of those 5 or a few of those 5 if that's applicable. More in depth on the proposal summary. So I'm now just basically going to go through each of the sections of the narrative and describe what it should be. So the summary should be 1 to 2 paragraphs. Before I get into this, the whole narrative really should be very short. It doesn't need to be too long. Being concise and to the point is key. And so your summary just goes over everything, the who, what, when, where, how, and why. Just give this a brief overview of what it is, and should really be sticking out at us. Oh, this is a brilliant idea. This is the exciting program that this person wants to, or this organization wants to implement. Your organization description, the important part about this is that that we want to know that the organization has the capability to carry out the activities that they have stated in the grant, or that they're stated in the proposal. Only one organization can be the recipient. So I know a lot of people have questions. Can we join a consortium? Can we partner with another organization? You can, however, only one organization can be the recipient. If you're partnering with another organization, they can be your subrecipient, or we'll go over that with another section of the proposal where you talk about who your partners are. But remember, only one person will be the one applying. Only one individual or one organization will be the one applying. You should talk about your organization's own goals and objectives and show how that matches with the notice of funding opportunity. If you've ever implemented or been awarded a US government grant or another international grant or a grant from Kenyan government, please do include that in your organization description. It is helpful to know that you've had experience in implementing previous grants. Next up is the problem statement. So simply, this is the problem that will be solved by the proposal. And it really relates what our goals are, right? The 5 goals in our funding opportunity are to what you will be doing and what the purpose of this proposal is. Your program objectives should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Those are your SMART, if any of you have heard SMART, they're your SMART objectives that they should be. And they should establish the benefit of funding in measurable terms. So we should be able to measure what the benefits are. Of course, it relates to the problem that you had just stated, and those activities then that you carry out should then relate to the objectives. And your activities should also have very defined participants. You should know who your participants are that you will be working with. The program design. So the program design should describe how the program will solve the stated problem and achieve the goal. So knowing how those activities will achieve the goal. And then the timeline, it's nice to see over which period of months that you will be carrying out the activities. The time of the period of performance for a grant will not exceed 1 year. So generally, grants that are funded through this small grants program will be a period of performance from an average of 6 months to 1 year. The activities should match with a timeline so that we can easily see in the activities section what you're planning on doing and see sort of over which months you plan on carrying out those activities. And it should be realistic. We know we want to be able to complete all the activities within the stated timeline. Key personnel. So here we want to know who will be implementing the project and why are they qualified to be the ones implementing that project. If it is a new position, please do provide a job description or a list of duties in case there isn't someone that's been hired yet for that position. You might sort of be waiting to see if you're going to hire someone to carry out the program. And please do attach CVs, attach your resume, and that will be a separate attachment to the proposal. And here is the section on project partners. So this is for many of you who are interested in sort of joining a consortium or a group of organizations. You'll have one person, remember, one person or one organization will apply. And then in this section, the project partners, you can provide the name and description of the other organization that will be assisting or working with you. And then it should be very clear which parts of the project they will be involved. And their budget will be separate as well. So we need to know as well of the budget that you're requesting, how much of that is contractual. We'll go a little bit more specific into budget in a few more slides, but you need to know how much will that be contractual. And if you are giving that money to another organization, they should then have another budget that specifies how that chunk of money will be spent from their organization. And then it is also the recipient's responsibility to monitor the work of their subgrantee and ensure the compliance with all grant regulations. Since the U.S. Embassy will only award the money to one organization, we will be in communication with that one organization to ensure compliance and monitoring of the performance of that grant. And so therefore, it's that grantee's responsibility to ensure compliance of the subgrantee. And if they do not comply, then it is incumbent on the grantee for the failure of the subgrantee. Unfortunately, you cannot partner with for-profit entities. You may need to contract out some work if you're going to hire a venue, of course, or if you need to pay for some video production. Perhaps you might be paying for-profit companies for their services, but you cannot have a partner that is a for-profit entity. You should also attach letters of commitment. And we have also seen before that people submit grants saying that they will partner with organizations. Then it turns out the organization has never been contacted or has never agreed to work with this person to carry out the grant. So we need to know before, as you submit the proposal, that this other organization is also willing to work with you on this grant. Your proposal should include an area of monitoring evaluation in defining specific indicators, how you will measure the success of the project. If you go back to your objectives, it should be very clearly tied to those objectives. You should lay out a strategy for how you will collect the data, how will you report it, how will you analyze it, and you should be building the M&E into your budget and your timeline so that it's realistic. We don't want you to spend all of your money on all the project activities and then when it comes to the M&E, there's no money left or time left. It should be thought about from the start. Also a section on sustainability. So sustainability is thinking about this program, how does it continue outside of the grant? So this is a small grant, it's a small amount of money. How does this program continue? And hint there, the plan should not be more US government funding or more donor funding. It should be a sustainable program in itself. However, sometimes, it's a program that just sort of like begins and ends, and that's fine. So in this instance, please explain how it will be a multiplier, how this one defined sort of like couple months program that ends, how will that then multiply out and create even a larger impact than just those couple defined months? And now, so that was the sort of the narrative portion that we were looking for. Those are all the sections that are required of the narrative portion. Now I'm going to go into the budget and talk a little bit about the budget categories and how to prepare the budget. So the SF424 forms have very specific budget categories that you need to, in which you need to organize your budget. And so you may also have your own internal budget of how you sort of conceptualize the program, but you needs to be very direct into this SF424 budget categories. The first is personnel. So this includes the salaries of employees of the primary grant recipient and organization. So for example, this means so it should be calculated as a level of effort. So we're not going to pay for the entire year's salary of one of the employees if they're not working 100% of the time all year round. For example, the executive director of the organization will dedicate 5% of their time over 6 months to this project. If their monthly salary is $5,000, we calculate 5% of their monthly salary, which is $250. And over the period of 6 months, the project salary for the executive director would be $1,500. So you have to calculate, and it's very helpful to show those calculations of their annual or monthly salary, level of effort, and the number of months or days or weeks that they'll be working on the project. Fringe benefits are generally not funded for small grant programs, such as the annual program statement, but fringe benefits would include something like health insurance if that's included in their salary or benefits. Travel would include everything from airfare, taxis, lodging, M&IE, so it's meals and incidental expenses, visa fees, travel insurance. Those should all go into the travel category for the people who are implementing the project. Supplies, supplies would cover any materials, banners, or small pieces of equipment. Large pieces of equipment, such as a large printer or what am I thinking? Like a solar panel or a structure, or a steamroller, construction equipment, those will not be funded. We do not fund equipment in this budget or in these public diplomacy grants. So contractual, this is where you'll include any partner organizations that will be carrying out part of the project for you. So you should, like I mentioned before, they should have their own separate detailed budget with the same budget categories of how they will spend their money. Contractual also include any vendors or rentals if you're renting a space or renting a something else. Then other direct costs could include something like honoraria for speakers, or maybe printing costs, since that isn't actually the material. The material will be like the paper, but the printing costs. And then indirect costs. So indirect costs are sort of the overhead of the organization, the keeping the lights on, the cell phone bills, and keeping everything running. And indirect costs can go a few different ways. One way is that they may be cost shared by the organization. So since these are small grants, the organization might not decide to incorporate indirect costs into the budget proposal, or it could be 10% de minimis. So if you choose to go this route, it is a 10% of direct costs, specific direct costs. And if you choose to go this route, we can help you calculate what the 10% would be, but it is a flat rate and it cannot go over 10% of the direct costs. And if you have a NICRA, if your organization has a NICRA, which I think is a negotiated indirect cost rate agreement, I believe. If you know what a NICRA is, your organization probably has one. If you don't know what it is, your organization probably doesn't. But this is a sort of only really for organizations that have a lot of grants with the US government, and they've negotiated a standard indirect cost rate with the US government, which for these small grants normally wouldn't apply. And cost share, I'll just mention, is not required. We don't require it, but it will be viewed favorably. It's not going to be a small, it will not be a big influence on the decision, but it may sort of tip the balance. Sorry. And sort of some tips on the budget. Please provide as much detail as possible. There are a few things that we cannot fund, that is travel to the United States. We will not pay for people to travel to the United States for conferences or whatnot. We can pay for US experts to travel to Kenya to promote that US-Kenya cooperation, but we cannot fund any program activities in the United States. Maybe that's another thing I should mention. No program activities that occur in the United States, or like outward facing public programs. Salary costs that don't directly support projects. So this is like what I mentioned before. You should be able to calculate your level of effort for that salary, and anything outside of that then should not be billed towards the grant or should not be included in the budget. And so we cannot pay for office equipment. We cannot pay to complete activities that have begun with other funds. This is a little tricky, right? So if you've already started a program with other funds that have run out and you just need a top up from another grantor, we cannot do that, unfortunately. We prefer, if we can pay for specific line items that have not already been funded from other programs. So for instance, if you do have an ongoing program, like we like to see that it's been going on, and you have a specific line item that has not been funded or has not been given any funding from another organization, we can do sort of specific line items, but we can't pay for the same activity as another organization. In most cases, we cannot pay for any refreshments. So the only exception to that is that it is an absolute requirement for the program activity. For instance, it's a full day event and there's no sort of place for people to go get food in the middle of the event. So they have to have, if they don't have lunch at the event, then they won't be able to stay. Then we can pay. Otherwise, we don't pay for refreshments. And we never pay for alcohol in all cases. I'm sorry. The general rule for budget is it reasonable? Does it make sense that it's included with the proposal? Is it allowable? Are we allowed to? Is it one of these restrictions? And allocable, meaning that we have the money that we can pay for it. Eligibility. So now on to eligibility. Nonprofit organizations, which includes think tanks, civil society organizations, community-based organizations, are all eligible to apply for grants. Individuals are eligible to apply. However, I will note that as an individual applying, if you should include information about why it is beneficial as an individual to be carrying out these grant activities rather than an organization, especially if you are working in conjunction with an organization. Why is it better that the individual will be carrying it out rather than the organization you're working with, for instance? And also remember that as an individual applying, we cannot pay for office equipment. So if you require a printer, if you require a computer, if you require a desk, if you require an office, you should already have those. You should have your home office that you can work from, or you should have some other setup, which sort of the setup that organizations might have, but individuals are eligible. Educational institutions are eligible, excluding those that are for-profit. So we can't pay for for-profit. We can't give grants to for-profit institutions, and governmental institutions can apply. Those that are not eligible, we cannot pay for partisan political activities or lobbying for anything. We cannot pay for any construction projects. So this is also a big one. A lot of people, some people ask for constructing a building or constructing some sort of greenhouse or constructing a chicken coop. We cannot pay for any construction. We cannot pay for charitable or development activities. So there, like I said, there's a lot of great organizations out there that are doing charitable work or doing development work, including our colleagues over here at US Agency for International Development. However, for this specific fund stream, we cannot pay for development activities or charity. We cannot support specific religious activities. So activities through this funding stream must be open. It must be open for all religions to participate. So it's okay if the organization has a specific religious affiliation. However, the project activities, you have to show that there is no discrimination on any basis of religion for the program. We cannot pay for fundraising campaigns, so we can't help you make money. We can't fund specific scientific or specific academic research. So if you're working on your thesis, unfortunately, we cannot pay for that. There's also other good programs like the Fulbright, I'll plug that now, where we do pay for specific and scientific academic research. So look into our Fulbright program, but not with this one. Initiatives that duplicate existing programs. So I mean, if we already are doing the same thing, we won't fund it, fund another. We can't fund activities in the United States, I mentioned that. We cannot fund scholarships or tuition assistance. I will make another plug. We have our Education USA program that helps students study in the United States. However, this grant program does not pay for any scholarships or tuition assistance in the United States or in Kenya. No commercial or for-profit endeavors. It means no venture capital, no seed funding or angel investment. So that means if you are a nonprofit and you're carrying out sort of an entrepreneurship program and you have seed funding, unfortunately, we cannot provide seed funding in the grant. You might have to find that through an angel investor somewhere else. And then we generally cannot fund prizes or competition awards. There are specific exceptions, but generally we cannot fund those. Mission. So applications must be submitted to Nairobi grants at state.gov. That's the only way of submitting them. You must include all the required documents, and you must have a DUNS number, an NCAGE code, and a valid registration on sam.gov. Sorry, organizations must, not individuals, but organizations must, prior to submitting the application. And I will note the process takes a long time. We understand it. It is difficult. So please start soon. Actually, I will reiterate that. Yes, we know the SAM and DUNS registration are difficult, but unfortunately, we cannot do it for you. Please also be aware of any scams out there. There are a lot of scams that ask you for money, but it is completely free. You should not pay anything at any point along the registration. And one big hang up we see when people are getting their SAM and DUNS registration is that some minute detail of something that they input does not exactly match with sort of their address. Could be like there's a dot here or a comma there, or there's an extra space somewhere at the end, and that will completely throw off your registration, and you'll have to get assistance. So please, as you go through, be very careful and pay attention to every single little detail as you make the registrations to avoid any problems. My colleague Monica, I know, will be talking a little bit more about SAM and DUNS, so I will stop there with that. And I will go into the grant review process. So the grant review process, we start with the technical review. And let's see, okay, so Monica, after I finish my presentation, Monica will come in and tell you all about why proposals do not pass the technical review. I understand it is frustrating for some people because we look through the proposals, and if they do not they're not technically eligible, we do not pass them on to the next stage. And because there are too many proposals, we cannot give personalized feedback on every single one. So pay attention to Monica's presentation, because she'll give you the answer of why a proposal you submitted might have been ineligible in the technical review. So those that are technically eligible will go to the grant panel, and the grant panel will meet. They will usually comprised of 5-7 people, and they will read all of the proposals, they will score them, and they will discuss, and they will make their comments. After that, they vote on those proposals, and those that have received enough votes to be approved will then go to embassy leadership, and they will make then another decision to say, yes, though I agree with the grant panel, or no, I don't agree with the grant panel, go back to the grant panel and make another decision. And then after the embassy leadership has approved what the grant panel has decided, then it goes back to the grants officer representative. And that person is an embassy employee, and they will reach out to the organization. For those that have, will reach out to the organization, either say, unfortunately, your proposal was not, we reviewed the proposal, unfortunately, it was not selected for funding, or they will reach out and say, we would like to pursue development of this proposal further. At that point, they have to sort of negotiate and work through all the comments of the grant panel. So the grant panel will usually make a lot of comments of what they found positive and what things need to be changed or adapted in the proposal in order to have a successful grant. And so then they'll work with the grantee or the organization or individual to work through some of those comments. And after they've reached an acceptable point, either, or if they have, then we'll send a sort of a specific award terms and conditions back to Washington, D.C., and we'll get approval back in Washington, D.C. to spend the money. And so at no point up until we sign the final award and the award takes effect, is there any obligation of financial commitment. So there's no promise of funding up until we've actually signed, which is after all of these steps. At that point, so once a proposal has been selected and has gotten approval, we'll sign the DS 1909, which is the grant document, which includes the specific award provisions, which we've previously agreed on. The grant will be, so the rules and conditions of the grant, so you can see there's our terms and conditions, there's the US law, the Federal Code of Regulations, and it also will be governed by sort of what our proposal and subsequent negotiations were before the signing. And with that, I will now turn it over to Monica for her presentation. And as she goes along, I know there's a lot of questions that are coming in. I'll try to answer some of them as she goes, but I will start talking and introduce my colleague who is the grants extraordinaire, Monica Munyori. Take it away.
Good evening, and thank you all for joining us. Let me share my presentation with you in a minute. Good evening, and thank you again for joining us. My name is Monica, and I work at the Public Diplomacy Section. I'm going to take you through a short presentation on the top reasons why proposals do not pass the technical review. Kindly be attentive, because you might take a lot of time preparing your proposal, only to end up not having your proposal get to the next stage, which is actually the panel review committee stage. So, so let's start by defining a technical review. What is a technical review? This is basically the initial screening of an application, of the application documents, to ensure that they are complete and they meet the program eligibility requirements as outlined in the funding announcement. If you have looked at our funding announcement, for those who have, we are very clear on what is required, who is eligible, what are the requirements, eligibility requirements, And this is what we do at this stage to make sure that your proposal meets those requirements. Please note, if your application does not meet the basic requirements, it will be rejected at this stage, and because of being technically ineligible, and therefore it will not be considered for funding by the merit review panel. Let me take you through the 5 reasons that we have listed. Let me take you through the 5 reasons. One of them is legal eligibility. So before beginning your application process, make sure your organization or you as an individual is eligible to apply for the grant. I would like you to note that each funding announcement has the requirements for eligibility might differ. So it is important, even if you have seen several announcements for funding from our office, please make sure you review each one of them to make sure that you are eligible to apply. So when considering eligibility, legal eligibility, the first step is to know what type of organization do you represent. In this case, are you an organization which is not for profit? Are you a not for profit? Are you an educational organization? Are you a government organization? Are you for profit organization? And it's also good for you to note at this point that we do not issue grants to for-profit entities. So make sure first step, find out who do you represent. Are you applying as an individual, or what type of organization are you? For eligibility requirements, as I have said, that we have outlined that information in the application instructions. If you're looking at our announcement on grants.gov, you can find that information in the instructions, which are summarized in the synopsis details. We also attach the funding announcement in the related documents section of the announcement in grants.gov. And just in case you are not able to retrieve that information from grants.gov, you can always reach out to our office on Nairobi grants@state.gov and request for the full announcement. So please note that if you are legally ineligible for a specific opportunity, you would waste a lot of time completing the application process when you cannot actually be considered. So please do not waste a lot of your time, applying and just for your application to be rejected. Make sure you have checked if you are legally eligible. Reason number 2 why your application may not be technically eligible is inactive or missing registration in the system for SAM, which is System for Award Management. So please note, all organizations applying for grants, this is except individuals, must obtain the following registrations prior to submitting their proposal. So note, this is must, and it has to be prior to submitting your proposal. One of them we call is a unique entity identifier. This is what we call the dance number. The second one is the NK code. And the last one is, after you have the NK code and the dance number, you register in the System for Award Management. So you have to have an active registration in the System for Award Management, which is SAM. So please note that third step, you cannot start with registering your entity in SAM. You have to get a dance number, an NK code, and the third step is when you register in the System for Award Management. As you apply for dance, NK, and register in System for Award Management, there are a few things I would like you to know. One is that registration is free of charge. There is no cost at all for applying for getting a dance number, an NK code, or registering the System for System for Award Management. Please note there are some sites actually that ask applicants for a fee, but please note it should be free of charge. 2 is that a full registration process can be very lengthy. It has several steps. It can take days to several weeks. So we advise you to start the application process very early so that you do not, so that you can make it in time, to apply for funding. Even if maybe I would advise you, even if you're not planning to apply for it now, or you would like maybe to apply for funding in a few months, it would be good for you to start the process now. Also, the information in dance, when you're applying for dance, when you're applying for NK, and when you're registering the system for award management, the information in all those systems must match exactly, or else you're going to encounter errors when registering in SAM. When I say they have to be the same match, they have to match, please note it is down to the commas and the spaces between words. So for example, if you're applying for dance and you have given a physical address and you have a PO box and given a certain number in Nairobi, or maybe it's in a code, a postal code, please note the same information has to appear in NK when you're applying for NK, and it has to be in the system for award management. So it's down to the commas and spaces. And again, if there are errors, you can take weeks actually to get those errors resolved. So be keen when you're working with all those three systems. In addition, registration is only for organizations, again, and not individuals. So it's only organizations that are required to have this registration. And please note, after you register your entity organization, annually, you have to renew your registration. Please note, when we are going through the technical review, if you have registered but your registration is inactive, we are still going to reject your application. Please make sure that annually you will renew your entities, your organization's registration. Also, dance and NCAGE application can be completed simultaneously. Okay, that is on dance and NCAGE exam registration. Then we move to the next reason why applications are considered to be ineligible. It is incomplete application package. So in order for you to for your application to be considered for funding, the applicant, you must submit the following documents: a proposal, a detailed budget, it has to be in US dollars, and a budget narrative. And all these documents must be in English. My colleague Devin actually has gone through each and every of these documents. I mean, the proposal, he has told you what it is that should be included, the budget, and the budget narrative. But please note, if you do not submit the 3 documents, we will not consider your application. It will not move to the next step to be considered, to be reviewed by the panel for funding. So again, these requirements may vary in every funding opportunity. So if we have multiple opportunities that we have announced, make sure you check all of them to make sure that these requirements are the same, because they might vary. The fourth reason why your application might not be considered for review is submitting more than one proposal. Please note, applicants are only allowed to submit one proposal per organization or individual. If more than one proposal is submitted from an organization or individual, all proposals from that institution or individual will be considered ineligible for funding. And then the final reason is missing required application forms. At this stage, we only require organizations and individuals to submit only one mandatory form. And this is it's application for federal assistance. For organizations, it's SF424. And for individuals, it's SF424I. These documents, again, are available on grants.gov. They are attached in the related documents section in grants.gov. And again, if you are not able to download those documents from grants.gov, you can always reach out to our office through our email, nairobigrants@state.gov, and request for these forms. Again, I've talked about the dance number. I've just given a definition of the dance number. It's a unique identification number, which for each physical location of your business. For example, if you have an organization with different branches, each of the locations have to have their own dance number. Please note each of them has to have their own dance number. And it is assigned, it's required for all organizations which wants to, to apply for grants or contracts with the US federal government. And then CAGE or NCAGE code. CAGE is actually for organizations located within the United States. And NCAGE code is for international organizations. Please note organizations, international is NCAGE and CAGE is for those organizations located in the United States. We have provided resources here for dance application. There's a web form for NCAGE code. There's a web page where you can actually be able to apply for the NCAGE code. And then on grants.gov, again, very good resources on how to apply and navigate through these systems, the dance and NCAGE and SAM registration. And again, for any questions, you can always send them to our Nairobi grants at state.gov mailbox. And I'll take back to you, Devin. That's the end of the presentation on our technical eligibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. I will, let's see, maybe, can we, let's see, can you stop sharing, Monica?
Yes.
I will. Okay, yes. Perfect. Okay, so I am going to go through and answer some of the questions that we have received. So I really appreciate that, Monica. I hope everybody, I was furiously typing away while you were talking to try to answer some of the questions that were on the Q&A. And I don't know if I caught up with everything, but I will try to answer some of the questions from the pre-registration that we might not have gotten to during our talk, or that I just want to hit another time. So who can apply? So the question of who can apply, can new organizations apply? So yes, new organizations are eligible to apply. However, you should demonstrate in this section on your sort of the introduction to your organization, why your organization has the capacity and the ability and the proven track record to carry out this grant. These are smaller grants, and we do want to partner with newer organizations that are especially those organizations that are new to us at least. So you should demonstrate why you can carry out these small grants. Multiple organizations apply together. I hope I answered that. Can students apply? Students could apply as an individual. Like I said, you cannot use this funding to pay for scholarship or funding for your own research or your own school fees. But if you have a program that fits with our mutual goals, then you may apply as a student if you have student status, right? Can you apply as an individual if you have another job? Again, this should be something you would be able to describe in your sort of introduction to your own capacity, that if you are applying as an individual and you have another full-time job, how will you have the time to carry out this program? I think that really just depends on the proposal that you've put together. And so you'll have to convince us that it is possible. How long does it take for selected organizations to receive the award? So after we have met, so our grant panel has met, we've received the fund, we've sort of went through the negotiations with the grantee organization, and we've received approval from the United States, from DC. Then usually, well, let me put that into perspective. That process from the panel meeting to getting the approval from DC might take around 1 month. And then as soon as we assign that award, we can set that program start date as the next day. So I would say after the grant panel has met, it might take about a month for the organization to get the award. And the performance period, I hope I mentioned that, was we expect it'll be about 6 months to a year for the performance period and cannot exceed 1 year. So that's a hard no, cannot exceed 1 year. Can an organization win multiple awards and make multiple submissions? hope Monica, if you're paying attention to Monica's presentation, no, you may not. You can, we may make multiple awards to different organizations. If you submit multiple proposals, all proposals will unfortunately be disqualified. So please choose your best one and submit the one. Do I have to pay back the grant? I actually got this a couple of times. The grant is for the funding for your organization to carry out the activities. It is not a loan. We do not, there's no interest. We pay the money to you to carry out the activities. You have to show us through your submission of reports, of your program reports and your financial reports, that you have carried out the activities and that you have spent the money as you said you would, and you have achieved, or you've attempted to achieve the goals that you said you have, but you do not need to pay back the grant unless you, well, let's hope that never happens, but unless you have spent the money on the wrong thing, or you have spent the money before we've told you you're allowed to spend the money, then in that case, we'll have to work with you. But as long as everything goes as planned, you do not have to pay it back. Can a grant work with local or international consultants? Yes, you may, and that would be our sort of the contractual. You may hire the services of a consultant, and they may be international to carry out the activities. Does it cover training? Yes. So if the training does carry out, is sort of integral to your program proposal, then yes, we may pay for training. Can it be multi-country? So for this grant program, it cannot be multi-country. We are only funding activities that take place in Kenya. There are many other grants, like as I mentioned, there's many other departments and federal agencies that provide grant money, and they work sort of in a regional focus. But unfortunately, well, fortunately or fortunately for some of you, this specific funding opportunity is only focused on activities that take place in Kenya. And then finally, the other question we got was, can it be used to fly Kenyans to the United States? And we mentioned that, but I'll reiterate again, no, that is one of the no's. We cannot pay for Kenyans to go to the United States. So with that, we are past the hour. I'm gonna quickly, well, I do wanna mention, because we've got this question quite a few times, that asking us to share the presentation. We will post a recording of this program today on Facebook and on YouTube. So if you're not already following us, follow us on Facebook, US Embassy Nairobi. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter. And we will also email everyone who registered a link to the YouTube so that you have it. Do feel free to share it with anybody who wanted to attend the conversation today but didn't have the opportunity. And with that, Monica, is there anything else you wanted to mention before we close out today?
No, nothing for now. No.
Okay, well,
you've covered everything.
Thanks, Monica. Well, thank you, Monica. Thank you to everyone who participated today. I hope you got something informative out of this program. And our email address is nairobigrants@state.gov. Let me just share that little question. Here, we'll have this back. So please do feel free to contact us if you have any further questions as you're submitting your proposal. And do check out if you haven't already, check out our notice of funding opportunity, our annual program statement on grants.gov. And we hope to be seeing your proposals very soon. And with that, have a good rest of your Tuesday, good evening, and take care. Bye.
Bye. Bye.